listening to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast. My name is Farhan, also known as Gunner since '96, and as always, joining me here this morning is Adam Keys. Adam, are you ready?
I'm ready, Farhan.
Okay, so first question. Should David Raya keep his place?
Yes.
Were Chelsea good or were Arsenal bad?
It was a bit of both. Chelsea were very well organised.
Oh, you're on the fence, Adam. I'm going to have to press you for an answer.
I'm going to say Chelsea were good.
Good. Okay. And finally, were you happy with a draw?
No.
Okay, good stuff. Adam, thank you for answering those questions. I know they were a little bit, how would you say it? A little bit cheeky of me to ask, especially the second one. We are going to get into it and break it all down. First things first, though, and most importantly, how are you feeling after that game?
Yeah, it's one of those that I've got mixed feelings. I'm obviously disappointed that we didn't come away with 3 points. But at the same time, I'm relieved that we came away with the draw. So it is one of those, whenever you're 2-0 down, look, it wasn't a good performance. I think having watched various different bits of highlights, analysis, looked into the game myself overnight, and really kind of watched a lot of comps on different players and so on, and extended highlights and whatnot. I don't think it's as bad of a performance as I thought it was when I was watching live. And I think quite often that's the case. We're so invested in the emotion that every mistake we make, we feel like it's just us making it. Whereas actually, when I look back at the game, Chelsea were very good. They were very well organised. But one of the key things is, well, during the game was the midfield battle. Whenever you look at the numbers of our midfield versus their midfield, Caicedo, Gallagher and Enzo actually lost the ball 2 times more than Odegaard, Rice and Jorginho, and they also completed significantly lower passing numbers. So I think it was one of those, our mistakes were amplified because of our standards now, and Chelsea, a bit like Arsenal a couple of years ago, whenever we would have played Chelsea, are in such a bad point that everything they did well was amplified the other way around, in that they got praise for doing the basics very well. But if you look at the game, they got a contentious penalty and a cross that slugged the keeper. So it was one of those games that I think that, look, I'm obviously gutted that we didn't get the 3 points. I think there's nothing that's going to change that. But at the same time, I think it's one of those that we have to praise the comeback, and we have to learn from this. And we have to learn from this very quickly, because there comes a point where we're 9 Premier League games into the season. We can't keep saying Arsenal haven't clicked yet. That's what we laughed at Spurs about last year. It was, oh, when Spurs click, everyone's going to be in trouble. It's got to the point now where Arsenal have to be clicking, and that was straight after an international break with quite a few players travelling all over the world. So that was always going to be a tough fixture. So Monty and I talked about that on Spaces before the game. But at the same time, it was one that we should have won. And I think that there's big lessons, and some players will have to have a hard look at themselves after that game. So yeah, disappointed, but one of those that I feel we can learn from and move on quickly. But it has to be quickly. How do you feel?
Yes, I'm taking a little bit more of a pessimistic view on this. And Adam, I appreciate, as always. I mean, no. To be fair, I do give Arsenal credit, and I do, I back them. Whenever we have a performance which isn't as great, there's ample excuses that we can give, but I think yesterday's performance, having played 9 games, and I get it, we've just come back from an international break. I get it, we're just seeing the front three, for one of the very few times that they played together. But we were playing a Chelsea side that have been abysmal up until this point, and they looked very, very good against us. I think you make a good point when you say that all the basics that they did were amplified. Maybe that is the case, but we know as Arsenal fans that we can be and we should be a lot better, especially with those 11 players who started. Each and every single one of them should have given 50% more than they gave in the match. Now, obviously, we'll look into it and we'll try and assess and understand why it was that we weren't able to play at the tempo, at the level that we're used to seeing. But look, ultimately, I feel like we made Chelsea look better than they needed to. I felt like if we matched their tempo and energy, it would have been a different game. But for whatever reason, we were just unable to match those heights. They made a number of mistakes. They looked sloppy in possession, especially in the first half. But the problem was we were also very sloppy in possession as well. So it is a mixed feeling because we were 2-0 down and we came back 2-2. So that shows me that here is a team who is proving yet again that they're capable, they're good enough to deal with difficult situations like this, and by doing that, hopefully challenging for the title in the long run. But 9 games in, we're still yet to see that really a consistent good performance. It's so far it's been every odd game. The last really good performance that we saw was against Bournemouth. Before that, it was United. So we haven't seen many outstanding performances where we've dominated the opposition. And I'm running out of patience with this concept that, well, we can't replicate last season's performances because other teams are far better prepared for us. I feel like we can flip the argument on the other side and say, well, Arsenal should be capable of upping their performances from last season. We should be better. We should be sharper. We should be able to beat, teams a lot earlier and maybe more convincingly than we did last season. But it seems like we've taken 2 steps backwards with our football identity, with the way that we break teams down. It seems like we're maybe the casual approach isn't as it's not being as effective as Arteta maybe thought it would. But yeah, I guess if I had to put one word to the performance and how I'm feeling as a fan, maybe I would say content, just based on how the game went. So yeah, that's how I'm feeling. So I feel like this episode we are going to be going back and forth with each other, maybe challenging each other on certain themes and topics. But yeah, I think overall most fans anyway will say, okay, we've come out with a point. We would have liked 3 points, but based on how the game went, we can move on. We can quickly assess this game, gloss over it, and move on. So that's where I stand. So let's quickly just have a talk about the starting lineup. I know in the preview show, we were quite keen on seeing Thomas Partey play alongside Declan Rice. That didn't happen. Arteta opted to go for Jorginho, and actually I thought he would go for Havertz instead. What did you make of the starting lineup?
I was happy with it. It was one of those... Look, I didn't have any complaints. I was more than happy with it. I was very pleased to see the front 3 going into the game. Jorginho played in there last year, had a very good game, and look, I didn't have any complaints. But that's kind of all I can say about it. It was one of those. I thought that team was more than capable of beating Chelsea. So yeah, more than happy with the starting 11. What about you?
Yeah, pretty much the same. Very positive about obviously seeing the front 3 and everyone else, the back 4, what I expected. Other than Jorginho, everything else is absolutely perfect. So yeah, no issues with that at all. Let's dive into the game, dive into the first half. Give me your take on the first 10 minutes before I tell you mine.
It was a shaky first 10 minutes. One of the things I noticed very early on was Declan Rice. He made a couple of very sloppy passes, and he did exactly the same against Man City, where he had a shaky start. So against City, he had one where he played the ball out of play. It was a very poor overhit pass to Zinchenko that went straight out for a throw and put us under a lot of pressure. And that led to a big part of the kind of kerfuffle in the box that ultimately led to him heading it off the line. But we had a similar start against Chelsea where it wouldn't really stick. And a large part of that, I think, was down to the weather. It's trying to judge the kind of weight you need to put on each pass, and all those things come into playing on a very heavy waterlogged pitch, not to mention the rain coming down in your eyes, the extra weight in your kit. All of those factors, whenever you're playing in those conditions, do feed into the game. And one of the things that I noticed from both sides was players very early on trying to judge how much weight to put on the pass, because in the way they would normally pass the ball, it wasn't reaching their kind of destination. Then as we started to sharpen up that bit more weight, bit more zip on our passes. But look, we were shaky, and they had a chance where Enzo put it over the bar. And I just felt there was a bit too much pinball for my liking, and the ball was flying around a lot. And that unpredictability it just leads to a bit of chaos. And that's something we've been better at managing this season. But I felt they came out of the traps 100 mile an hour, two wins on the bounce after such a poor run of results for so long, that their confidence were up, their tails were up, and they wanted to get at us. And that was a game they really, really wanted to win. And they, like, if you think there's pressure on Arsenal, there is huge pressure on Pochettino and Chelsea right now. It's a case of they've spent over £1 billion. They've got everyone on their backs. So a bit like we say, oh, you only ever hear this about Arsenal. You don't if you go onto Chelsea Twitter or United Twitter. Every big club gets the same level of criticism and praise. Man City are one of the few that seem to, like, there's a media love-in for City despite the cheating. And but yeah, Chelsea under big pressure, and I thought that they really showed a hunger and desire to get at us. And I would have liked to see a bit of the same back, because they were well organised. They had plenty of runners on the pitch. The lineup was clever from Poch in that he started Cole Palmer and to essentially make four in midfield. But look, I was really impressed with their energy, their work rate, their desire, and you have to give them credit to how they started the game. But I would have liked to have seen just a bit more kind of gusto from us in the opening stages, because there were spells in that opening 10 where we did get it down and play a bit, and then we would lose it, trying to force things. Everyone's touches off on a wet pitch, and there's just a bit too much chaos in there for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was very frantic, especially in the opening 5 minutes of the game. Chelsea were looking very, very dangerous. They were, I think, in the first 5 minutes, they were on the edge of our box on 3 different occasions. You talk about that first opportunity in the opening minute after, Sterling's put in behind the defensive line. Zinchenko fails to clear the ball, faffs around with it, and then Enzo has a shot which goes over. A minute later, Rice loses the ball in the middle of the pitch, allowing them to pose kind of another, dangerous attack. Luckily, we were able to deal with it. But yeah, Chelsea started the game of high tempo, moving the ball really, really quickly, playing with, a high defensive line, and we were just far too slow. Far too tepid, almost. The tempo just almost as if we and I mentioned this in the preview show. I said we needed to play our tempo. We needed to try and slow the game down as much as possible. This was always going to be a very chaotic sort of game, because it's Arsenal versus Chelsea. It's at the Bridge. It's an evening kickoff, and it's against a side who desperately need to win. And all of those things come into play. They have an impact on the tempo of the game. So really surprised that we were unable to impose ourselves quick enough. And again, as you said, the rain, unfortunately, it does have an impact. But I don't want to, put too much emphasis on that external factor, because Chelsea managed to deal with it fine. They managed to still play their game really well. So there was no excuse that we couldn't replicate that either. But yeah, credit to them, because they did a really, really good job off the ball as well as on the ball. The pressure that they put on us the moment they lost it was really good, and is exemplified what we usually do Most of the time whenever we're playing a side, and if we lose the ball, Arteta's first instruction is get the ball back as quickly as possible. And actually, in the first 10 minutes, we did have a really good opportunity. I think near the end of the first 10, they make a terrible mistake on the edge of their box. I think it might be Odegaard who picks it up. Rather than playing the ball to Saka, he decides to go alone and then gets tackled, loses the ball. I felt like that was a really, really big chance for us. But we move on to the second 10, and basically what happens is they manage to get themselves a penalty. Now, I think you had a few reservations about the penalty. Am I right in thinking that?
No, I think the penalty was spot on by the letter of the law. That's the issue here. It's the letter of the law that's the issue. And I think Jimmy Redknapp, Gary Neville and so on really summed it up accurately in that when you look at Saliba's arms, look where he's jumping, look how he's going for the ball. It's like, where are his arms supposed to go? Jimmy Redknapp said the ball's headed at his arm from half a yard away. There is genuinely no way he can jump for a ball and move his arm out of the way. So, but look, there was a similar one given in the Merseyside derby. And for me, I had no doubts that it was going to be given. And I also didn't have any complaints because it is the letter of the law. It was contentious in the sense that it's again, I think a misunderstanding of kind of how players jump. I've said this for years. The least natural position to have your arms in is behind your back when you jump, when you block a shot, anything. If you move with your hands behind your back, your balance is completely off. It's unnatural. But yeah, it's because referees have never kicked the ball in their life. Most of these referees start reffing when they're about 15 because they can't play football. And it's so the laws are made by those kinds of people. And you don't jump with your hands by your side. It's impossible to do that and compete for headers. But look, by the letter of the law, it's a penalty. But my problems around the penalty came that Cole Palmer had that shocking tackle on Gabriel Jesus moments before, where he comes in from behind, very similar to Kovacic. Wet pitch, a lot of momentum behind the challenge, catches him on the back of his ankle from behind very late. And it's got to the point where I don't understand what a red card is anymore. They keep saying about things being a high tackle. Look, I've had shocking injuries. I've dislocated my knees 5 times, but one of the worst came from a 2-footed challenge on the ground, not high, where it caught my toe and caused my knee to dislocate. And that was a result of momentum on a wet pitch. You don't have to be high to cause serious injury. Yes, you can break someone's leg, but that injury or those tackles from Kovacic and Palmer on Jesus and Odegaard are 2 challenges that could have broken a player's ankle very, very easily. They were from behind, they were late, and the player can't see it coming to get out of the way. And that's why they're so dangerous. Palmer was given a yellow card after play was pulled back. Jesus was lying down for quite some time until it was actually pulled back. And as far as I'm aware, that wasn't checked by VAR. That should have been checked for serious foul play. Then the penalty itself, again, as I said, I'm fine with the decision. But one of the things that really bugs me is, again, VAR, I think it's a great piece of technology. It's run by incompetent fools. It's run by people that have never played football in their lives. And the game went on for over 2 minutes after that penalty call. Arsenal had the ball, they were playing, and then Chelsea got it and basically slowed the game waiting for that decision. But in the process of that, we won the ball back. Saka is taken out by Cucurella on the line. Instead of booking him as it should, because it's still an open play, it's still part of the game hasn't stopped. He commits a challenge from behind, and we should have been given a free kick at that point. But because it was reviewed by VAR, it went back to the penalty. So the ref couldn't wait to get over to the monitor. And instead of giving Cucurella a yellow card before he goes over to the monitor, he just runs straight over because he's dying to blow the whistle. But right, why can't the game be stopped after a call like that instead of it running for 2 minutes? What happens if Saka gets injured at that point? That's a bad challenge. It could have caused a bad injury, and that's from a point of the game that's completely dead. The game can be stopped for it to be reviewed. It has to be stopped. It was the same thing in the Liverpool Spurs game. The game should have been stopped and restarted. You can restart the game with a drop ball. If no penalties given, give a drop ball, and the game restarts. That's just something that needs to come in. There is no point in playing 2 minutes of dead possession as Chelsea wait for a penalty and Saka gets a bad challenge. Now, they are my real gripes around the penalty decision. It's one, Palmer shouldn't be on the pitch after that. That should have been a red card. And two, the length of time it took to give the penalty. Stop the game. If you think it's a penalty, give it straight away. We don't need 100 angles of the ball hitting Saliba's arm. We saw it in open play, and the minute it hit his arm, I thought it was going to be given. So yeah, that's my real gripe with this. And it's officials that don't understand football that are given these decisions and making huge calls that impact games. And it's week after week we're talking about referees rather than the quality of the play in Premier League football. So yeah, I hate going in on refs after games because I always think you should have enough to win it even without these decisions. But it is genuinely affecting the game week in, week out.
I think one of the things that we need to remember when we're assessing referees and talking about decisions, and it's taken a very long time for me to come to this point of accepting it is what it is, but ultimately this is the entertainment industry, and I think everything is judged based on entertainment. So that first challenge from Palmer on Jesus is absolutely a red card. He catches him by the heel, studs up. By the letter of the law, that's a red card. But because it's in the opening 10 minutes, because it's a frantic start, it's Chelsea really going 100 miles an hour, it makes it that much more difficult for the ref to take out a red card. The penalty decision itself, you're absolutely right. That needs to be they need to scrap this, this decision of playing the game until the ball's out of play before going back to then review the goal. Because what then happens if Arsenal go on to score a goal? Do you scrap that goal? Do you then go back and then give them a penalty? Like, how does that? We haven't come to a situation like that, but it's not very practical. It doesn't work as well as they thought it would, and decisions aren't, like, things that happen in that run of play aren't looked at or aren't concentrated on because of the previous sort of penalty decision. So that's the only explanation I can give for Palmer not given a straight red, or that decision not being looked at closely enough. But from an Arsenal point of view, anyway, it's unfortunate that Saliba concedes that penalty. If it was flipped on the other way, the other side, if it was us and, it was a Chelsea defender who handled the ball in that manner, I think we'd all be screaming for a penalty. Unfortunately, it's a case where, you have to draw the line somewhere, right, when it comes to handball. And if your arms are in the air, you've committed yourself to that risk of potentially playing the ball with your hand. Now, I get the ball is, half a meter away from, I think it was Mudryk, next to Saliba, who was going for the header. It's half a meter away from him. He's not going to get the ball. But if we're to draw the line somewhere, it's going to have to be, it's going to have to be there, right? If your arms are in the air, you're risking playing the ball with your hand, or with your arm in this case. I was very much the same as you.
On this one, if you look at Saliba's position and his body, one of the things Mudryk does really well, and he deserves a lot of credit, is the speed at which he arrives and heads that ball. He really breaks his back to get to that, and I think his speed catches Saliba out, because that ball's going straight to Saliba. He's going to win it. He's going to deal with it. And his arm is in the natural position to deal with it. If you look at every header that every centre-back, every striker made during that game, their arms are in that position. What's ironic is, if you look at Mudryk's, the positions of his arms, he jumps in exactly the same way with his arms in the same position. It is headed onto Saliba's arm. And it's one of those A few years ago, that would be ball to hand, not a handball. And the handball rule needs to be reviewed. That's, I think, the start and end of it. We're seeing too many penalties for handballs in situations like that. I know Spurs fans will point out the penalty we got against them. However, the difference there is that ball was inside the 6-yard box going towards goal, and his hand is right up in the air and he actually bats it down. So I believe Romero was in more control of his body than he would let on. But I do think we're seeing too many very soft handball penalties given, because Mudryk wasn't scoring from there. And again, we're seeing penalties given for very soft things that aren't going to lead to goals. And that is part of the problem that we've got with this right now. But I think it's not going to change anytime soon, because if anything, they just keep making the rules of the game worse.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, Palmer converts the penalty, sends Raya the wrong way, and they're 1-0 up. And you're thinking at that point, surely this is the moment where we kick it up a notch, really start turning on the heat. Unfortunately, I felt like the passing after we conceded the goal, the passing was too slow. It was too safe. There was not enough movement happening off the ball. We were too predictable. We were moving the ball backwards instead of forwards. It was a terrible tempo to everything that we were doing on the ball. And to make it worse, we had players like Jorginho clumsily passing the ball, out of play. Simple passes weren't being made. And we were really struggling to get the ball past the midfield line. And I don't know why. Usually we're really good at getting past that first line of defense and then being able to dictate, the channels when we're in the opposition half. This time around, we were just not very competitive with our passing, chasing the ball with, not really chasing the ball with any intensity either. Chelsea, on the other hand, were like sprinting off the ball to chase the ball. Whereas us, we were kind of like jogging, trudging along. It was almost like watching 10 Havertz's on the pitch. So it was really frustrating for me. But having said that, though, there were a number of chances that were created. So there was Zinchenko with a lovely pass. It kind of pokes through Chelsea's defence into Rice, drives into the box, shot goes wide. Maybe he could do better there. Maybe
I don't think it was a shot.
But I think he did the right thing by. Do you not think it was a shot, really?
No.
To me, it was like a shot.
It was a really poorly executed pass. If you look at his eyes, same as Mudryk's goal, Rice's eyes are on Jesus in the box. It was one of those, I want to see Declan Rice put his laces through it. On that kind of pitch, you can't be, you're too close to the striker, it's too unpredictable to put the ball in the box there. Bending your foot around the ball where there's no grip, it's so slippy. Just put your laces behind it and try and get that on goal, and it could squirm onto the keeper. But yeah, I thought it was really poor from Declan Rice in that position.
Yeah, similarly, well, not similarly, but, the opposite side of the flank, White plays a short ball into the box, which finds Jesus, tries to turn and shoot, goes up for a corner. And then, yeah, so there were plenty of chances for us, and we seem to be, finding the ball in the latter stages of the Chelsea half, but for whatever reason, it just wasn't clicking. Now, is this a combination of the football not being good enough, or are we talking about certain individuals who just weren't able to, flick that switch on? Because I felt like certainly with Martinelli, for instance, he struggled to be able to take his man on, in this case, Gusto, and I think coming second best out of most of those duels.
I've got a lot to say on Martinelli here. I think Arteta's letting him down big time at the minute, and my criticism for Arteta is the left-hand side of the pitch at Arsenal. He hasn't addressed it. So Rice playing in that left eight role is more of an all-action box-to-box midfielder, where he's covering huge areas of ground. So we've lost the presence that Granit Xhaka gave, and where he was higher up the pitch and coming back to support a bit. But Xhaka's heat map last season was very advanced. If you look at Martinelli in those situations last night, it was he was isolated time and time again. Zinchenko isn't an overlapper, he's an inverter. So that means that Martinelli doesn't have someone to stretch the pitch for him, get around him, give the defender something to think about. Martinelli is having to beat his man every time, and he put a number of really good crosses into the box, but when people were doubling up on Martinelli, he's got two men to beat, and quite often his only option is to give it back to like a player arriving later. In that situation, quite often it was Declan Rice arriving to give him that support, but far too often he is being isolated, and the support Saka has on the right-hand side is just astronomical in comparison to what Martinelli has to work with on the left. And too often we see Martinelli in space and the ball isn't given out to him quick enough. We're seeing 2 or 3 passes when one quick switch will do. A really like driven quick pass with zip across the pitch. That gets it out to Martinelli quickly. It opens up the pitch. It really puts Chelsea under pressure. It makes them all... Like a big switch across the pitch gives everyone time to reset, but a very quick switch at the edge of the box round in the way that we see Partey give to Saka quite often can unsettle people. It makes everyone react quickly. And I think we need to see that more with Martinelli because he's a player that likes to run into the box. He's someone, as we said on the preview show, wants to find the fastest route to goal. But too often yesterday, he was coming up against Thiago Silva and Gusto. And to beat two players time and time again is really difficult. Saka has it in the opposite flank where he gets doubled up, trebled up on. But he has Ben White stretching. He's got Odegaard coming to support. Even when Partey's on the pitch, he's always in that area too. So Saka has so much support, whereas Martinelli is having to do so much himself. And when you're playing on a waterlogged pitch like that, every time you push the ball forward, it stops. And you have to work so much harder to beat your man. And if you look at the number of players that were completing dribbles yesterday, there weren't a huge amount in the first half. So it was a really tough afternoon for Martinelli, but I thought he worked really hard. And he is being let down by that left-hand side because he just doesn't have the support that he needs. And it's something that we talked a lot about with Havertz coming in. And it's still that, where does Arteta want Havertz to play? Because if he's coming in as a left 8, we need him playing left 8. But right now, I think that's a real weakness for us. And yeah, I'm a bit worried about that area of the pitch. And it's not because of Martinelli.
So here's what I don't understand. Last season, we perfected the system moving forward on either flanks. On the right-hand side, you had Ben White overlapping Saka. Odegaard comes in to support with that triangle. Perfect. On the left-hand side, you had Martinelli, Granit Xhaka on the inverted side, supporting him on the edge of the box. You didn't need an overlapping runner because we wanted to find a different way of going down the flank. If he mirrored both sides, then you're giving the opposition a quick and easy solution to nullify both sides. Is it a case that we just don't have the personnel to replicate what Granit Xhaka did last season? Or is it the case that, Arteta has decided to change things around a little bit by introducing Zinchenko as an inverted fullback, in which case he almost wants Zinchenko to play that Xhaka role, but in a less intense manner, because you still have someone like Havertz there playing as an additional, almost as an advanced number 8. So with Granit Xhaka, you had one number 8, but with Zinchenko and Havertz, you've got 2, but they're both playing sort of side by side of one another. And in theory, it should, by adding that extra man, it should allow Martinelli a little bit more freedom to, have support from those individuals, but also be able to, do what he does best, which is put his head down and run at the defence. What is it? Which one is it?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I think it's like when Martinelli gets his head down and runs, we know it can create real problems. But I think we just need to have better movement in the final third overall. And I think right now we are just too static up there. There's parts of the pitch were really good, but I just feel there's so much not clicking. But it is also important to remember that's the first time that front three have played together this season. So yeah, I'm not
Well,
fully
look,
sure.
here's another question I had for you. Just on those front three, here's another question I had for you. We were so used to seeing the interchanging ability of those front three and how
Yeah.
effective it was in confusing the opposition defense because you never knew who you were going to be up against. Yesterday, I don't think I saw a single moment where Jesus played on the left-hand side, which he usually
Yeah, I was
does. Like
thinking
last
that the
season, it was
whole.
usually that position. But for
Yeah.
whatever reason, Martinelli never saw the center of the pitch and he never saw the left hand side. Did that come down to just not being confident enough or not being sharp enough or the fact that the game wasn't going our way? What was it?
No, I genuinely believe everything that we see on a pitch from Arsenal is instructional. Arteta is so kind of like micromanages every detail, everything's thought out. So if Martinelli's not going into the centre of the pitch against Chelsea, it will be because that's how he's instructed to play. I would say he was told to hug the touchline yesterday. The big thing going into that game that we needed to be aware of was hitting them in the wide areas. And we didn't do that well enough yesterday. They played a team full of runners, a very compact system that was going to be very difficult to play through, and the space was in the wide areas, and we didn't get the support out to Martinelli to really exploit that. We didn't get the ball to Saka quick enough. We played into their hands and played in a congested midfield area, and that cost us yesterday. There's no doubt about it, but look, I genuinely think that the lack of interchanging would have been instructional. But I completely agree with you about Jesus. We didn't see him going out left, and that was one of the things that caused the most problems last season was him going left, and he did it very few times yesterday. So it really dragged centre backs around. Jesus was coming a bit too deep for my liking. I know he works hard and everything, and people say that's really honest team play. But for me, I want to see my striker causing problems in the final third. I don't mind them drifting wide, running the channels, dribbling, taking players on, but I don't want to see them back defending. That's just like Wayne Rooney used to get loads of credit for it whenever he was young. But when Rooney really kind of matured and became the player that we all remember him as, he was impacting the game in the final third, not coming back and defending and being this action man, cape on type player. It's the same with Jesus. I want to see him getting in, really causing problems. But I think one of your earlier points about was it players not clicking? There were times Odegaard played a pass through to Jesus, and the two of them just seemed on completely different wavelengths. But I thought Odegaard was very, very poor yesterday. Nothing that he tried really came off.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I also felt that Jesus, it was a very bad Gabriel Jesus performance in that, again, he seemed on a just off it. His touch was funny at times. He was too greedy at other times. We had one that led to a Chelsea break where Jesus had a great first touch inside the box and he tries to dribble past 3 or 4 players and we end up losing it. And it was one of those, just get that ball down, give it and get playing. Don't try to take on 3 or 4 players in that kind of pitch. So yeah, but again, I think this stuff is instructional. That's Arteta thinks of every detail and gives everyone such specific instructions that when players aren't moving, I don't think it's down to confidence. Remember, Jesus has just come back. He scored 3 goals since he's come back. Saka has 5 goals and 5 assists. Martinelli's just scored the winner against Man City. Confidence should be sky high with those players. But I think so much is down to the control Arteta's trying to give that we're trying to build up without losing our defensive shape, that it's really affecting the cohesion of our attacking shape.
Yeah, and that's something that honestly I don't I don't know if I like. Like I really miss and I crave to see the Arsenal of last season where we were just so chaotic and frantic and opposition's teams were almost, just dumbfounded at the level of pace that we were playing at. And in the latter stages of the first half, we were really struggling to match the tempo of Chelsea's football. No, they weren't outstandingly great. I mean, they had a few really good opportunities that, maybe at the end of the first half, they would have felt like they needed to be two up, especially with Gallagher running past Jorginho with ease, passes it into Palmer. Palmer's shot going inches wide. And yeah, I did want to have a chat about one of the main reasons why we were so ineffective, or we were so tame in both, chasing the ball but also using it effectively, is unfortunately comes down to the lack of Odegaard not being there, not being at the races, almost non-existent, just really struggling to get near the ball. And he's the guy who leads the press. Whenever we watch Arsenal closing down the opposition, giving them little time and space to make any decisions, it's him leading the pack. It's him waving his arms around, making sure that everyone behind him is running forward. And yesterday, it was, I felt like he struggled. I felt like he really struggled to impose himself. He really struggled to put any pressure. It almost felt like he was hiding for most of the game. Touches not coming off, passes not being as inventive as we would have liked. And you mentioned the Arteta trying to perfect, or trying to almost concentrate a bit too hard on the defensive shape. But our shape was all over the place. Gabriel and Saliba looked disjointed. They weren't reacting quick enough. They weren't in a shape which made us secure, as we saw against City. Chelsea attacking our box and having a field day because of how disjointed we were. So we arrive at the end of the first half. Chelsea, quite unfortunate to only be 1-0 up. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yes and no. I think they had chances, but I think we're overplaying how good those chances were. I honestly think a large part of the first half was a lot more pinball. When you watch it back and you look through the key areas, there were so many times where the ball was just flying around everywhere. And they put a lot of effort in, they put a lot of work rate in, but I didn't feel they deserved to be more than 1-0 up. We had, I think the game was a lot more even. We had chances, we had opportunities, we were in good positions and didn't take advantage of them. But I don't think, I think if you look at the first half again, we had 62% of the ball in the first half. Whenever you were watching that live, it didn't feel that way. And I think quite often when you look at like domination of games, like my mate texted me during the game and said Zinchenko's given the ball away so much. He actually lost the ball about 4 times. I went on Twitter during the game, which I'm trying not to do, as I've told you before, just because it feeds into kind of how you view a game.
Yeah.
But it was just Jorginho keeps giving away possession. Jorginho in the whole game lost possession 11 times. He completed 91% of his passes. That was significantly more than what Enzo, Gallagher or Caicedo completed during the game. And I think when we watch games and you're full of emotion and you want your team to win, it's very easy to get sucked into this, that Arsenal are really bad, because we're looking for goals, we're looking for excitement, we're looking for all the good things. And like Jorginho was only on the pitch 65 minutes. He completed more passes in that time than Enzo Fernandez, Moses Caicedo or Conor Gallagher, which shows how much play we actually had in midfield. So those kind of things they kept saying about the midfield battle, Chelsea winning it. Actually, I think they ran harder and they exploited our mistakes better. Whereas I think that a lot of the chances they had were difficult chances to take. The ball was bouncing around a lot. And I don't really think they deserved to be more than 1-0 up at halftime. I think it was one of those, even the 5 minutes before the whistle, we started to get a bit more settled. And we're looking at it, and Neville had said, oh, it has to be more than a few minutes. I can't see him blowing the whistle up. And he blew the whistle bang on 47 minutes. But we were starting to play a bit more at that point and hold on to the ball a bit better. The weather was calming down. And I do think it was one of those that how poor we were was overstated because of the expectations on us and because of where Chelsea are. But you have to remember, this is a team that cost £1 billion over the last 12 months. So there's a lot of quality in there. It's just expectations are so low. So yeah, to answer the question, I think we were better in the first half than we probably realised in really, really tough conditions. And ultimately, the game changed because of that penalty. I think had that penalty not have been given, it would have been a very, very different game. That really lifted the spirits of the crowd, the players, everything. And I think coming straight after an international break, it really kind of impacted us as well. So yeah, they didn't deserve.
Yeah, it kills off momentum. You know, the trouble with international breaks, it does kill off momentum. It requires you to restart again and go. You know, just try and rebuild what you. Because in any other circumstances, beating City and then playing the next opposition is dangerous for Chelsea. You know, they I think they were quite fortunate to have that international break placed where it was. Just quickly before we move on to the second half, on Jorginho, you know, you're quite defensive about his performance, and I don't know if it's if we're you know doing justice to the narrative of the game when we're talking about or when we're reflecting on players' performances based on their passing accuracy or the number of touches that they had, because a large portion of that first half was down to everything other than on-ball stats. It was, you know, matching the intensity. It was chasing. It was closing down. It was maintaining good shape. I did genuinely feel like Jorginho was one of the big reasons why we looked so flat, you know?
No, it's Jorginho is one of those players. He moves the ball so well. He takes very few touches. He just keeps things ticking, and I think it was very much down to, like, again, he won all his ground duels yesterday. Really high pass percentage completion, completed all his long passes, and he was someone that was actually vary in the distance of his passing, which was something that our other midfielders weren't. And the other key thing to remember is when you've got a midfield trio, that trio has to be clicking together. And that was something that I think we saw from Chelsea's midfield. Even though they lost the ball a lot more than us, those three worked as a unit. And I think yesterday, Martin Odegaard, his pressing was off, his passing was off, his touch was off, everything wasn't right. And whenever you've got a player like Jorginho behind him, who's just a metronome, just keeping that ball ticking, time, he just keeps passing it, moving it. And when you've got one of those three in midfield that is really underperforming, it impacts the player playing six significantly. And I think what we saw was Odegaard not getting the ball out quickly enough to Saka, and that started very early on, as you mentioned, when that chance he had to play it wide and he carried it. But look, I think Jorginho's performance was very good, and it was one of those. Jorginho is a player that just gets criticised for anything he does, so it takes a lot for him to get praise from Arsenal fans because of the Chelsea connections, and it takes very little for him to be knocked. And had we not have been 1-0 down at half time, no one would have been criticising Jorginho in that game.
No, look, I like Jorginho. I think he has a part to play in certain games, and I think playing him in that Chelsea game, the way that it went, probably the wrong decision in hindsight. I think if we're playing a game where we want to be a little bit more controlled in possession, where we want to build up a little bit more slowly, fine, he's perfect. When you want to close a game down in the final 20 minutes, great, but he doesn't suit a high tempo game. And we saw that, you know, look, there was that moment that I talked about where I think Gallagher just I don't know, he kind of just walks past him with too much ease. And then the shot from who has the shot? It was Palmer with the shot which goes inches wide. Had he put that on
Yeah.
target, maybe it goes into the bottom corner. But I just didn't like how easily we were opened up, in the kind of in the center of the pitch. But anyway, so we've arrived at the halfway point where I'll be taking you, Adam, into the second half. But actually, I'm going to use this period, this point to fill in. I think I've figured out how to fill in this gap, and I'm going to use it to get you to summarize that first half in one word.
Lackluster.
Okay, perfect. So, the second half. Arteta decides to bring on Tomiyasu for Zinchenko, which suggests that he wanted a little bit more stability in defence. But it didn't answer our lack of cohesion going forward, why we were so lackluster, and where the solution was. It showed me that Arteta wasn't worried about how we were looking going forward, and it suggested that we were just far too leaky in the back, especially down at left-hand side. Sterling was great in that first half. Sterling, on a number of occasions, looked like he was going to cause an issue. Unfortunately, they just missed that final bit of quality in the final third in the box. And then very, very soon after, every Arsenal fan's nightmares comes to life. Mudryk scores a screamer, beating Raya from a ridiculous angle. Now, I haven't watched the goal back. Since you're telling me that he wanted it to be a cross, I'm going to take your word for it. But it did look like, he knew what he wanted to do. But obviously, you're going to argue.
I've watched this back so many times. His eyes are in the center of the box where he wants to cross that ball. He mishits it in the same way Declan Rice mishit his, and that's a cross all day long. He stally mishits that ball, and I also think too much is being made out of David Raya's positioning. Tim Stillman made a really good point on the positioning,
Yep.
and it was that David Seaman used to take up that exact position, which led to Seaman being lobbed, but it also led to a really high percentage of crosses claimed. If you look at Raya's claims from crosses, they're one of the highest in the league, and even since he's been at Arsenal, yesterday he made a number of really good high claims. Now, I think he should have dealt better with it, but I think too much is being made of it. If you want your keeper to take aggressive positions, take those claims in the air, really get the team going from the back and aggressively approach the game, you're going to see mistakes from that. It's the same way as we defended Ramsdale after the Sporting game whenever he took up a high position and he got lobbed. The thing is, I'm losing sympathy for Aaron Ramsdale every day because of this forced agenda that's being pushed by the British media. If Aaron Ramsdale wasn't English, this wouldn't be such a big thing. Ramsdale's made plenty of mistakes at Arsenal. Raya's made a few already. But look, the issue for me, and I've said this loads of times, is that both keepers are at a very similar level. I think they've got different traits. And I don't see Raya being an upgrade on Ramsdale. I think he's different to Ramsdale, and Arteta clearly sees something that he likes in Raya. But for me, it's a case of the positioning that Raya took up. He took up that position loads of times during the game. He gets beaten by a mishit cross, and yes, he should be dealing better with that. But at the same time, I think every mistake he is making right now is being amplified. And I think Arteta's created a situation we didn't need. He's created a circus around the goalkeepers. And the whole true number ones is only going to be good for Arsenal. We've talked about this before. You were very against it at the start. And I'm really coming around to that way of thinking that actually we didn't need this squad harmony and so on. But also, I just think the media circus, it's people say, oh, ignore the pundits, this, that, cut out the noise, you back whoever's number one. Of course we do. We do back whoever's number one. The issue is every time Raya makes a mistake, it's going to be massively amplified and pushed towards Ramsdale's done nothing wrong, even though he has. And at the same time, that leads to apprehension within the crowd, especially at the Emirates, where the crowd's easily unsettled anyway. The away fans, not so much. But look, all these factors come into play, and I think when Raya does make a mistake, it's just going to be a huge talking point, and that's something that I just don't feel we need at the minute. But look, it's Arteta's call. I think we're going to find out at the end of the season whether he got it right or not. But right now, I'm not sure about it. But look, I can tell you, I would put my mortgage on it. Mudryk did not mean that. And Arteta said that in his interview after the game, where he was like, "Oh, he meant that, did he?" Yeah. And he just baffled because Mudryk claimed his goalkeeping coach told him to do it. And it's like, mate, catch yourself on. You're a very good player, but you don't have that level of technique.
No, you're right. I've just rewatched it, and you're right. What he's intending to do is to get that ball into Sterling in the back post. And here's the issue that I have. I'm going to have to vehemently disagree with you on Raya's positioning, because he doesn't need to be so far out of his box. If I was to understand that there's no one around him, there's no Chelsea shirts in and around that 6-yard area, then fair enough. But he's got Sterling in the back post, free as a bird. Okay, Tomiyasu has got him, and maybe in that duel, Tomiyasu wins. But if you know you've got a blue shirt in and around that area, there is no reason for you to be positioned so far out of your box at all. The ball's delivered. He hasn't even... He's got no time to even fix his positioning, even if that cross is a little bit centre as opposed to, facing that far, the back post. I'm just going to play it again. So because he's so far out, he's not even in a position to try and tip the ball over. That's my first problem, number one. He's not positioned well enough to deal with any type of situation, whether it's going to be whether the cross is going to be placed in the middle of the pitch, middle of the box, whether it's coming towards the far back post. This was a fluke. It shouldn't have ended in the back of the net, but it did. But if we're to imagine that this was a simple cross which ends up finding the position that Mudryk wanted to, he's still not placed in a reasonable position in order to deal with it. And this is far too, for me anyway, now, it's far too many big errors to overlook. There was another situation, I think he makes another error 10 minutes later where he passes the ball straight into the path of Palmer, gets away with it. Didn't look comfortable. He was under huge amounts of pressure. But this is not what I saw with Aaron Ramsdale. And me personally, I don't know how other people view this, whether it's an English thing or not. But I view Aaron Ramsdale as someone who is capable of playing in the Arsenal goal. He has proved it time and time again that his distribution is good enough, his shot-stopping ability is good enough, and I think we're being far too analytical with these little minute details about how how able someone is to pick the ball up off the air, or how the percentage of someone's passing accuracy. I think when it comes to the goalkeeping position, it's very, very simple and straightforward. Keep the ball out the back of the net. Ramsdale had one of the highest clean sheets, number of clean sheets last season. I think either second or third in the Premier League. This was a huge error by Arteta, by Arsenal, to think that bringing in David Raya would make this situation. It would improve Aaron Ramsdale's performance or David Raya's. They're obviously both feeling huge amounts of pressure, and that pressure isn't turning them into diamond goalkeepers. So what happens now? Who do you think needs to play in midweek in the Champions League? I know Ramsdale he's taken some time off after the birth of his son. Did he have a son? But is he back? Is he back for that game against Sevilla? I'm not sure.
We won't know until Tuesday about that.
Yeah. So you tell me what needs to happen with David Raya. I know I've been quite harsh and I've been quite critical, maybe a little bit too critical, but I just feel so frustrated at the amount of huge errors. You know, I mean, first half against City wasn't good enough. The game before that, there was a big error in the Champions League, and now again, we're seeing two more big errors. There has to be a time where we look at everything in isolation and say, right, enough is enough. We need to be a little bit more cutthroat and ruthless. If a goalkeeper makes a mistake like that, he needs to be taken out for Ramsdale. And then if Ramsdale makes a huge mistake, he's then going to have to be taken out. Otherwise, where's the justice in this? But how fair is it? You know?
I think Arteta's talked a lot of bollocks about the two keepers. I said that from day one. I don't think this is going to be a rotation thing. And also, you can't keep changing your keeper. It's if we drop a player every time they make a mistake, that completely kills confidence. Neither of them know which one's going to play week to week. Also, in training, you build up an understanding as a team. It's like if Saliba makes a mistake, are we going to drop him straight away? That I also think, look, David Raya's mistake against Lens is massively overstated. And I said this on the pod. It was a poor pass, but it's a handball. Should have been given as a free kick straight away. It wasn't. Ball goes into their striker, lays it off, world-class finish after that. So it's not a case of he gives the ball away and it leads straight to a goal like Ramsdale against Southampton. It's then the first half against City, Arteta talked about that being instructional. If that was Ramsdale, he would start kicking that ball long. He would have completely reduced the anxiety within the crowd, but that's not what Arteta wanted. We're very quick to criticise a player without looking at the overall picture. I don't necessarily like this tactic, but it's what Arteta wants. It's the kind of play he wants to build up the team. So with Alvarez closing him down, Arteta talked about wanting to invite the press. It was a very clear tactic. He said if he had kept kicking it long, we would have lost possession. And that's something that Ramsdale was doing last season. We were getting really frustrated with his kicking because he was putting it out of play too much. And if you look at Ramsdale's kicking numbers, even on a bad day, they're still significantly lower than Raya's. So, look, this is a funny debate for me because I don't see Raya being an upgrade on Ramsdale. I don't think it was a position we needed to look at. And I think it's a position that by creating this drama, we have left ourselves one short elsewhere in the pitch, and we should have looked at a different type of a different position to sign a player in, but we didn't. I think the mistake yesterday is a fluke cross and one that can come in 100 times. Raya will deal with that ball because it'll go where it's intended to. It was one of those. I think we can criticise him, we can tear him to shreds, but also let's look at the good he did. He had one when he snatched it from Jackson's feet, a couple of other good saves that he made during the game. He made a number of really good claims from crosses. And I think it's a case of he's being over-criticised and mistakes are being over-amplified right now. But against City, he grew into that game. And there's times that we have to look at the tactics and look beyond the individual doing those things. And it's the same with the front three. I would say Saka, Jesus and Martinelli want to play in that chaotic, frantic way rather than this slow build-up that we've got this year. But that's not what Arteta's wanting. So there are times we have to look at the decisions of Arteta rather than the individuals. And for me, I think going in really hard on Raya and really criticising every mistake, it's a case of we're never going to see him at his best if we keep chopping and changing keeper. But as I've said, it's a situation that I don't like. It's a situation I don't think we needed. And it's one that I don't want to see us changing keeper every other week because I think that just creates confusion with the back four. And look, we all want to believe Arteta's right with every decision and that he's a visionary and that Arsenal fans know best. But when you've got every ex-pro saying the same thing, every ex-pro saying about keepers being protective and needing that reassurance and so on, there is something in it. It's a bit like what Gary Neville said last year about us being over-emotional. We all said that Neville was an idiot, all this stuff, but he was proved right at the end of the season. And I think that's something that sometimes we just need to realise that some of these pundits do actually know what they're talking about as much as we want to believe they talk a load of bollocks.
Okay. All right, I'm not going to beat this Raya drum anymore. I think we'll just give it time and see where the situation takes us. But what I will say is there needs to be some consequences. Otherwise, you're just rewarding or you're justifying mistakes. Mistakes are okay at this level. They're not okay at this level. We need to be a little bit more, like I said, ruthless and cutthroat. If we're to go for a league title, levels have to be increased. But I'll leave it there. Let's talk about the remainder of the second half, which was jam-packed with lots of action. Arsenal finally pick up the tempo after going 2 down, moving the ball quicker into the wide areas. But Chelsea set up really well defensively. They didn't need to be as chaotic as they were in the first half. There was finally a sense of urgency from us. It took 2 goals to see that. Martinelli with a curling effort, which deflects off Silva for a corner. And then Gabriel's header from a corner as well, which went out for a goal kick. I felt like he could have done a lot better.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but we didn't really see a replay of that either. Because that was one I was thinking so that looked like a clear header at the back post.
Yeah. I felt like that as well. Yeah, I made a note of it straight away, and when I watched it, he needed to do a lot better. And I put it there. He needs to do better with a header like that. It's a clear-cut header for you as a centre back who is dominant in the air, someone who scored in the fixture last season. I felt like that needed to be on target. It wasn't, unfortunately. But what we can say, the positives from being 2-0 down, is that the tempo of the game picked up slightly and we were able to finally get the ball into the final thirds. It wasn't until we made the changes, though, where the game really came to life. Nketiah and Emil Smith-Rowe come on for Jesus and Jorginho. Let's have a chat about Nketiah, because when he did come on, the remainder of the game seemed to be a lot more fluid than it was with Jesus in the number 9 position. Have we arrived at a point where, despite Nketiah not having all the other things we want in a striker, what he has got is the presence and I guess the positional discipline that Jesus doesn't have? And actually, when you've got a centre forward who sticks to his position, who makes the runs off the ball, or who looks for the timed runs behind the defensive line, it's far more effective having someone like that than someone like Jesus, who comes in deep, tries to play with the other midfielders and tries to play around the blue shirts, as opposed to someone who's looking for those opportunities.
I don't know, because I didn't really think Eddie did anything. He had 2 passes during the game, 10 touches. He was running, he was doing what he does, but I didn't think he did much. And
he made us look better in the final third.
Did he? Like that's the thing.
I felt like we were far more open. We looked far more open. We looked far more. Maybe because we were 2-0 down and we increased the tempo and we played with a little bit more aggression. That was the case. But honestly, I felt like when Eddie came on with Emil Smith-Rowe, we were a lot more direct.
I think Jesus didn't have a good game. Odegaard really didn't have a good game either. But it was one of those. I didn't think it was Nketiah made the difference. I think it was what you've just said, that the tempo increased. Chelsea were more defensive. They were sitting back a bit more. Those changes came just after the Raya error to Palmer, which he probably should have scored from. But yeah, it was I think a big part of it was, I don't think it had anything to do with Nketiah coming on, but we brought Smith-Rowe on at the same time, and I think there was just a bit more energy in the team. The pitch was also starting to dry up a bit, so it was favouring our play a bit more. Everyone's touch was increasing. Ben White's first touch was off in the first half because the ball was just flying. If you put that ball in the air when players went to control it, if you were running, the ball just skied off your foot. And I think around the time that they come on, the pitch was really starting to settle down. Chelsea were playing with a more disciplined shape, as opposed to a lot of hard running and trying to play a combative transitional style. But I don't think it had anything to do with Nketiah. I think the team as a whole picked up around that point, and in the minutes before the two of them came on.
Okay. The game changes on its head And I felt like when I was watching the game, we needed a bit of luck. We needed a stroke of luck to get back into this game. We weren't really generating enough. We weren't being good enough. We didn't look like we had enough confidence to really pull anything out of the pockets. But it was a game of goalkeeping howlers, and this one, goes right at the top. Right at the top. A terrible misplaced pass into Rice, but to go for the shot from that space, from that area of the pitch, I think he's 35 yards out, is audacious to say the least. But he makes it look so easy. I mean, what a finish. And if we're talking about individuals who can keep their head high, leaving the pitch, Declan Rice was one of them, and he consistently does it week in, week out. Another sterling performance, in my opinion. Not the best, but he matched the tempo and he played with the aggression needed across both halves, I felt.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm going to take a different stance on Sanchez. I think he's being unfairly criticised, and there's another English player that isn't being criticised fairly for this. It is Conor Gallagher. Sanchez makes that pass to Gallagher. Gallagher's looking at the ball, and what Declan Rice does, where he isn't getting the credit for, he is more alive to that than Gallagher. He wants that ball more. He runs in ahead of him, and Gallagher was praised continuously for his work rate, his tenacity, all the things that he was doing well. He completely switches off in this moment. Rice gets in and he uses Enzo as a blocker, bends it round him, and puts it expertly into the bottom corner. It's funny, he said that Beckham was his inspiration for that goal, and that was a David Beckham type finish. He catches it so sweetly. There's so much venom on the strike. It's one of those. Look, I think you're right in what you said about Declan Rice. There were some bits where he wasn't perfect yesterday, but I think it was one of those games. It was kind of bit of Roy Keane in there. It was one of those performances where it was just aggressive, and I think you really summed it up very well. He battled from both boxes, and when he moved into that sixth position, I actually thought he looked a lot better. I don't really like him as a lefty, and I know he's someone that could play like Steven Gerrard in that really aggressive, like box-to-box style, but I just don't think he's got the instinctive finishing that someone like Gerrard had. And for me, I think Rice can really drive the team forward from deep rather than impacting the game higher up the park where he has less touches. So yeah, but that finish is absolutely beautiful. And it came at the perfect point because we were getting a bit frustrated before that. We were making stupid decisions. Gabriel really pissed me off moments before that. I don't know if you recall, but the ball goes out of play. I think it's Gallagher again. And we've won a throw and Gabriel turns around and kicks him. And out of frustration, and they get a free kick, and all the good work we've done has just become undone. So it was moments like that were coming into our game. We were getting really just agitated, and real immaturity was creeping into the performance. And I think Declan Rice in that moment showed a real level head that wasn't really evident in the rest of the team at that point. So yeah, just a brilliant finish. And I think every week we're seeing exactly what we've bought and why he costs so much. So, and I just love him. I just love that he plays for Arsenal. I love the passion that he brings. And I love that he just leads by example. He doesn't have that switch off. Like, everything's just done to such a high standard that I think he's an example for everyone else.
Yeah, I think in the summer we definitely need to get someone who plays alongside him, who's up at that level as well. I'm dying to see him and Partey play together, but I know come the summer, we're gonna have to move on from Partey, and so in order to continue that trajectory, in order to ease the burden off him and allow him to play with a little bit more freedom and be better than he is, we need to bring in someone who can play alongside him. I talked about moments of luck, but you don't need to. It's that goal in itself was created by Declan Rice. It wasn't necessarily down to luck. As you said, he beats Gallagher. He curls that shot into the corner, and brilliantly done. And then moments after that, Odegaard, Martinelli come off for Havertz and Trossard, which two brilliant changes from Arteta, if we're going to criticize him about everything else in the game, we're going to have to give him the praise that he deserves, which is bringing on Havertz and Trossard at the right time. And, you know, I felt like even after we scored the first goal, even after we conceded the second goal, we still weren't, there was still that sharpness missing in the final third. There was still that fluidity that wasn't, you know, right. The tempo wasn't great in the movement, in the decision making. But with Havertz and Trossard coming in, I felt like we were more dominant. We were more, what's the word? We were more competitive. We were more competitive in the final third. Yeah, and you know, the second goal came not too long after they came on. But just before we scored the second goal, did you feel like we were going to get back into this game?
Yeah.
After the first goal?
Yeah, to be honest, I felt that the whole way through it, there was Chelsea were there to be got at. And the one player that has been getting so much praise, and I thought he is a nervous wreck, was Colwill. If you look at every time Colwill got the ball, he hoofed it long. Like time after time, he didn't play it out. He was hoofing it long, and it was just like, get at that player. He looks nervy in there. He's just hoofing the ball, and like he actually finished the game. He had 63 passes completed, but there were so many times that if he was under any kind of pressure, he just hoofed it, and he lost possession 17 times, which is very high for a centre back, and one that he only completed 6 out of his 15 long passes, which shows how many hoofs he had up the pitch. And it was one that I felt they were there to be got at. And if we really put the pressure on in that area, I thought that Chelsea defensive unit would have been broken down. I felt we could have pressed Sanchez a bit more, given that he looked nervy in goal. But throughout the game, I was talking to my dad, I was talking to my mate, and I kept saying, like, we can turn this around. It's like we're playing so badly, but it just feels like if we can get one back, we can turn this around. And after we scored the first, I was looking at it, 77 minutes, like there's still at least 15 minutes left in this game. We can easily turn this around. And obviously it came, and it was good play from Havertz, laying it off to Saka, and that cross from Saka, that's on a plate. That's exactly what you want as a forward. Right in, on your foot, and it couldn't have been more delicious. It was so much like pace and whip and everything on it. Just shows you can keep Saka relatively quiet for a game, but he is always going to get that moment where he causes problems. That's his 6th assist of the season. He's got 5 goals as well. He didn't look fully sharp yesterday, but he still beat Cucurella multiple times. He still managed to wade his way into the Chelsea box. He still caused them a lot of problems. And that was on a quiet day for Saka. I think we're going to see him bounce back from this and have a real stormer at the weekend.
Yeah, as you say, that goal exemplifies what Saka is, which is a superstar with something in his back pocket always. I felt like he really struggled yesterday. You know, I think we're giving him a bit too much credit when we say he didn't have his best game. I think he struggled quite a bit. But that cross in the back post for Trossard, perfect on the plate, as you said, and he just taps it in. Sanchez maybe could do better, but the flow of that play, the speed of that play as well, was far too quick for Chelsea to kind of react to. It's a lovely pass from Ben White to Havertz, isn't it? And then, you know, find Saka out wide. And then, you know, 2-2, jubilation, fans going crazy. And there's still time for us to get a winning goal. And after that goal went in, I did feel like with 15, 20 minutes left on the clock, we could have got the third goal if we were just a little bit more aggressive. There was a chance, Eddie with a poking shot which goes wide. All of a sudden, everything came alive. The game flips on its head. Chelsea are looking the more nervous side, the side who's looking to protect that point. Something that really annoyed me about, I hate to come back to the David Raya whole conversation, but there's a difference that I realize with a clear difference that I'm realizing with Raya and Ramsdale. Ramsdale's the more frantic and chaotic keeper, and Raya's a little bit more measured and calm. In the 90th minute, the goalkeeper gets the ball, and rather than releasing it straight away to try and hit us on a quick, counter attack, if you want to call it that, or just a quick release, decides to hold on to the ball for 30 odd seconds where everyone gets to regroup themselves. It annoyed me a little bit because I felt like at that moment in the game, it was really there to be won by us. And rather than, releasing the ball really quickly, he just decides to just, slow things down. But yeah, ultimately, I felt like we could have won that game and we didn't. I don't know how you felt about those final 5 minutes going into the game, but a fair assessment would be that we've come out of a really tricky game, having not lost and still undefeated in the league.
Yeah, I think at the end of the game, I would have liked to have seen a bit more intensity because obviously Nketiah had that chance where he flashed it across the goal. He actually did really well there. I watched it back this morning and it was one of those at the time I thought he could have got a bit more on it. But actually, he manages to get in there right in front of the defender, does really well. And I just wanted to keep that momentum building at that point. I just didn't think we had the intensity required at the end. And I do agree there were times, not just Raya, I thought our centre-backs, our midfield could have got forward more. And it was one of those with Havertz and Nketiah on the pitch. I thought, get it in the box a bit more. So people want Ivan Toney to come in because of his aerial presence. Kai Havertz gives you all that, but we don't play like that. If you look at when he came on yesterday, he was very dominant in the air against Chelsea. He gave us a real focal point to aim at. But on top of that, he was running, he was working, he was linking play. But again, Arsenal don't just ping the ball in the box, and it was one of those games, given how wet the pitch was, I would have liked to have seen a bit more of that. Just get the ball in the box and go a bit more direct, and you've got the momentum. And it is one of those, you can call it luck, you can call it whatever, but when the momentum of the game is going your way, you do often get that bit of luck, and a lot of it comes down to the doubt of the defenders. If you've just conceded 2 goals after being 2 up, if you put the ball into a dangerous area, quite often something breaks for you, someone gets a foot to it or whatever. So I think you're right. I would have liked to have seen a bit more intensity at the end, but at the same time, we have come away. We are still unbeaten. The worry for me is that we need to really click faster. So if you look at the draws we've had, they've all come down to individual mistakes. Spurs, Jorginho's mistake, and Declan Rice for the first goal against Spurs where he doesn't follow his man. Fulham, you've got Saka, Partey's misunderstanding, Ramsdale obviously being caught there. Then this time you've got a penalty and a positional mistake from Raya. So all in all, I think it's one of those, we need to cut out these individual errors, but we have only won 2 games by more than 2 goals. And that was United, where we scored 2 very late goals, and the Bournemouth game. So I think our ruthlessness and our efficiency going forward is something that we need to get in place quite quickly. And I'm hoping with Jesus, Saka and Martinelli now all fit, that will improve. But I think every Arsenal fan's feeling the same about our attacking play right now. We just need to get that sorted out quite quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so depending on how you see this game is what is how we conclude this episode. Would you put this game down to a good result or a bad result?
Look, I think if we're just going by the game itself, I think it's a bad result. I think there was a lot of big concerning performances. There was a lot of errors. There was a lot to not like about the performance. We know this team is character. We know they can come back. So coming back from 2-0 down at Stamford Bridge is something to be very proud of. But I think at the same time, you can be proud of something while still recognising it as a poor result. It was a game we needed to win and should have won, especially after the back of the City win. But we have to pick ourselves up and move on from here. What do you think?
Well, since you have decided this is a bad result, it's now time for good, bad, ugly. And I think you're right. I think going into this game, we needed to get the 3 points. We needed to be a lot more competitive than we were. And yeah, we need to start clicking really, really quickly. In the next run of games, don't get easier for us. We've got an away trip to Sevilla, followed by a home Premier League game against Sheffield United, who actually played really well against Manchester United, albeit a home game for them. But then 3 days after that, a trip to West Ham in the League Cup, a competition. I really want Arsenal to progress and go as far as they can, even if they can win it, it'd be great. And then Newcastle away, So some tough games coming up. We really do need to start tying those knots and just. I think injury has a part to play in it as well. Not having the right personnel. I'm hoping that Partey comes back so that we can finally see the Partey Rice pivot, and yeah, hopefully the front three as well can stay fit. Okay, so good, bad, ugly. Give me your good moment of the game.
My good moment of the game. Did you say?
Yes.
My good moment. I'm going to go with Declan Rice's goal. What's yours?
Yeah, I'm going to go for Bukayo Saka's cross. Both hand in hand. Really good combination. Oh, no, but that was for the second goal. So, yeah, Bukayo Saka's cross for the second goal. Excellent on the plate.
And Trossard deserves a lot of credit. Lovely controlled finish.
Yeah, right. Right place, right time. Makes it look easy, but I can assure you, not easy. When you've got the goalkeeper, a meter away from you as well, not expecting what he's going to do. So, yeah, give me your bad moment of the game.
I'm going to go with Raya's positioning for the goal. Actually, no, I'm going to go with Raya's pass to Palmer, because if that goes in, that's 3-0 and game over. So I think that's more concerning than his positioning from the cross.
Yeah, you make a good point there. My bad moment of the game is... Do you know what? I'm gonna give a bit of an unexpected bad moment. The first minute of the game, Zinchenko failing to clear the ball in the box, and then it finds its way to Enzo, whose shot goes over. But that first opening minute was just terrible for me. Really, really bad. Needed to be able to just flick that switch quicker and just be a bit more focused than we were. So that's my bad moment. Finally, your ugly moment of the game.
Ugly is the VAR incident around the pen and Cucurella not being booked because the ref was so keen to run to the monitor.
Yeah, as expected, my bad moment is going to have to go with David Raya. Unfortunately, the goal conceded, just not good enough for me. We need to cut out those errors. We can't be analysing and discussing errors like that when we're going for a title. Maybe I'm being harsh. Who knows? Let's see. Hopefully he bounces back. Hopefully we get to see the best version of him soon. So yeah, that's our good, bad and ugly moment. And I guess it's that time of the show where unfortunately we must say goodbye. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who's listened up until this point. Thank you very, very much. If you did enjoy this episode, make sure to give it a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Let us know what you thought of the show by reaching out to us on Twitter. You can find us over there at Arsenal Therapy. You can also find Adam over there at AdamKeys_. And you can find myself over there at GunnerSince96. As always, we'll be back in a few days' time to give you your usual weekly dose of Arsenal Therapy. But if you can't wait until then, make sure to head over to the Arsenal Therapy YouTube channel for the 15-minute show where we'll be taking you through all the latest bits of Arsenal updates on a Tuesday morning. And make sure to also head over to the Arsenal Therapy website as well for the blog posts where we'll be breaking down all our thoughts and feelings on this game and much, much more. So until then, take care of yourselves. Have a lovely week, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you very much. Bye bye.